All right, here we go with episode 98 of Return to Authenticity. And this week's guest is Adam Barr. This was a fun conversation with another of our nation's veterans. Adam is a U.S. Air Force Iraq War veteran and tells a great story of his life kind of leading up to and then entering the Air Force and then his time in the Air Force and just talks about that. A really engaging conversationalist. Adam's a podcaster himself. He has a podcast called the Biz Dad Podcast where he's focused on what it is to be a good dad in business. And he tells this story of how he started to get into business, right? Never really envisioned himself as a businessman, as an entrepreneur. And his wife helped him see that vision. And she and he have started a real estate investing business specifically for veterans to help veterans learn how to invest in real estate. And Adam tells this great story of buying his first multifamily apartment building while he was deployed overseas. It's a crazy story and a fun one, and really great educational information here. And what I love so much about Adam is his faith forward, his love of his family, his wife, and his love of Jesus Christ. It's a really powerful conversation, and I think you're really going to love it. So sit back and get ready to enjoy this week's talk, episode 98 with Adam Barr. Welcome to the Return to Authenticity podcast, where we hear inspiring and courageous stories of people who made bold pivots in their lives toward their more authentic selves, that version of themselves they were born to be or they had to find after life threw them a major curveball. I'm your host, Eric Sardina. Welcome and stand by. Welcome to the show, everyone. Today's guest is Adam Barr. Adam was raised an Air Force brat, and his family moved around the country before he joined the United States Air Force himself and traveled the world, including a combat tour in Iraq. Adam's wife, Raquel, also a U.S. Air Force Iraq War veteran, was instrumental in his decision to start investing in real estate, as she saw its power through her family's investments growing up. Adam learned to analyze single and multifamily properties while still in the Air Force and bought his first investment property, a 62-unit apartment building, while still serving in Japan. Adam currently co-leads Active Duty Passive Income's Military Multifamily Academy and Mastermind, where he utilizes his passion for property research and underwriting to help guide and coach new investors and help them begin to plan for their eventual transition to civilian life while still in the military. Adam and his wife Raquel founded their real estate investment company, RAL Capital Group, to be family-focused, Christ-centered, and growth-minded, with the goal of being actively engaged and present in their three kids' lives and in their community while educating others and building financial success along the way. He's also the co-author of a #1 best-selling book on Amazon titled Military House Hacking, and he's the host of the Biz Dad podcast. I'm excited to have Adam on the show today to share how he navigated the transition from military career to successful civilian life while keeping the most important things first, his relationship with God, his family, and his community at the center of his life. And with that, Adam Barr, welcome to the show.
Thank you so very much, Eric. It's an absolute pleasure. Looking forward to chatting.
Likewise, man. It's going to be a good conversation. I'm excited to have it. I'm excited to hear how these things happen because you have no shortage of things going on in your life. And what I love talking with entrepreneurs about is especially those that are in GoBundance and that have this balance mindset, right? It's not all about just building and stacking financial wealth to then turn around and say, well, I'm going to, I guess, give it to my kids and that will be sufficient, right? How do I stay present? How do I manage and have time abundance? How do I give to community? How do I stay focused on faith? All these things are so important and often get overlooked in the business world. So I'm excited to hear how you've managed to do it and how you also made the tough transition, having a lot of friends in the military, not having been in the military myself, but certainly a lot of friends in the military. I understand how difficult that transition can be from this sort of mission-focused, purpose-driven military life to now what am I about now that I'm a civilian? I'm sort of lost. And the fact that you're helping people make that move while still in is unique, novel, and super exciting to hear about. So I'm excited, man.
Me too. Yeah, it's a difficult transition. It's a completely different world that I'm in now than I ever thought I would be. And so yeah, it's a fun thing to dive down.
Right on. Let's talk about it, man. Let's talk about childhood growing up. You were a military
Mhm.
brat, so talk about life in the Air Force as a kid and kind of what that did in shaping you.
Yeah, so both my parents were Air Force. They met while in the Air Force, and then my mom got out when she got pregnant with my oldest sister. So I was born in North Dakota. I bounced around all over the place. I never really had a home. Even with my dad, he broke his back. So I lived in five different states before I was in junior high,
Oh,
right?
wow.
So, and then even once that happened, I still bounced around a lot more once we finally landed, quote unquote, in New York after my dad got out. So, it was always, meeting somebody new, learning a new state, learning a new school.
Yeah.
There would be summers in between. Like I moved from New Mexico to South Carolina, and my school in New Mexico, we weren't doing cursive writing, but my school in South Carolina, they were. So like we sat in summer and I just had to practice all of my cursive writing before we started school the next year. And like, so there was always something in the transition that I had to change what I was, who I was, what I was doing. So it was just kind of always on the move. And so that's just kind of what I knew. And that's what I've always felt, was just part of me. So, that was very instrumental in me, growing up and joining the Air Force. Like I was like, oh, this is what LeBars do. Like we join the military and go and
Right.
serve our country and go do our thing. So,
Right.
I never knew that there was anything else to do. I never talked to anybody about college. I never talked to anybody about anything. It was just, I'm going to the Air Force. So, 16 years old, I signed up for the Air Force and got my driver's license within like the same month. So,
Wow. At
yeah.
16. So obviously you needed parental permission to sign off on that, which your parents were
Yeah.
probably fine with. Is that
Oh yeah, my mom brought me there, and we sat down with the recruiter, signed all the paperwork, and you get stuck in this thing called delayed enlistment program or DEP. So I was there until I graduated high school, just waiting. I'd go on monthly meetings with my recruiter and all the other kids in DEP, and then off to the Air Force I went right after I graduated high school.
wow? So you were 17 when you went in or 18?
I was 18 when I finally went in, yeah, but I
Okay.
signed up at 16. Yeah.
Yep, yep. And it was always going to be Air Force. No question on that. Or
There was no question on that. No, I mean, I had some time in between, while I was in the Air Force for a little while, and then I was like, man, I thought about going to the Army. I thought about going to the Marine Corps. Like I wanted to deploy and do some more, but I stayed Air Force the entire time. I still got my deployments and still got all of that involved, but
right, right.
just stayed with the Air Force side.
Were you an athletic kid? Were you physical and kind of did you get out in
Uh,
nature, that type of stuff when you were a kid, or do you not remember?
I I did, but I wasn't really all that good at it. So I didn't hit 5 feet tall or 100 pounds until the summer before 10th grade. So I was always very little. I mean, and now I'm still semi short. I'm only 5'9", but I'm 200 pounds and I've got a whole lot more behind me than I ever did, back then.
Right.
So it took me a long time to kind of grow into myself and figure out who I was. And that wasn't until even years into the military before I finally figured out who I was and had the confidence to be able to do things like sports. And like I played football, but I wore the pads. I didn't really play much. I was always afraid to get hit. I was always, I was a wrestler. That is one thing I definitely did. And I started off good at that. And then, as everybody else kept growing and I didn't, it made it very difficult for me to keep wrestling. I was really not, it was tough. So, but yeah.
Right on. Did you have a goal when you joined the Air Force? Were you like, I'm going to be a pilot? Did you have a kind of a vision of what the Air Force was going to be for you?
So I wish I did. My parents always told me they're like, yeah, you should be an officer, and to be a pilot, you have to be an officer. So you have to go through college and then become an officer. Um, they always said I should be an officer, and then they brought me to the enlisted recruiter anyways. Like I don't know if they just didn't really know kind of the officer process, like,
Uh-huh.
hey, you need to apply for a college and all this stuff. So I guess my goal was just to join the military, and I just assumed I was going to retire from the Air Force, and that was it. I didn't really know exactly what I was getting into until I got in, right? But I went to MEPS, which is the military entrance processing system, and I go through there. I said, "Hey, this is the job I want to do," and I went home, and it just happened to be the same job my dad did. I did, like it wasn't on purpose. I just read the thing, and I was like, "That sounds like a lot of fun," and I did that. So I was what's called a crew chief for a tactical aircraft maintenance apprentice. So I twisted wrenches on a stealth fighter back in the day,
Wow.
and so I mean, I didn't really have necessarily goals in mind. I knew that, especially once I got in, I was like, "Well, I really want to deploy." I want to go to Iraq. I want to go to Afghanistan. I want to go do all of that stuff. And I didn't really have the chance to do it when I was working on aircraft. That wasn't especially that aircraft. We didn't really deploy to Iraq and Afghanistan. That was a very behind the scenes aircraft. So
Was that the
made it a little
F-117
tougher.
or which one?
Yep. Yep. The
117.
F-117.
Yeah. That aircraft still in operational use?
No, not anymore. Nope. They took it out of use maybe somewhere around oh boy, when did they take it out? Maybe 2012, something like that.
Oh wow.
Maybe even before that.
Yeah, I remember that thing looked like a spaceship, man. It was all well, the ones I saw anyway were black, and they didn't seem to have every angle was a funky angle, and
Oh yeah.
yeah.
That's exactly right. There's only a couple 90-degree angles on the entire plane, and they're so tiny that, everything is designed to bounce radar off of it so that it doesn't come back to anything. So,
Yeah. Very cool. All right, and so your dad was a career Air Force guy, right? That was his. How long?
well, he was in for about 15 years, and he broke his back.
Mm.
So when he broke his back, they medically sent him out. He didn't get a retirement or anything. It was right when Clinton came in. He was really kind of taking an axe to the military side of the house,
Yeah.
shut a bunch of bases down, kicked a bunch of people out, and my dad was one of the people that got kicked out even after 15 years. So no retirement, but sent into a different career after that.
Wow. So how did that kind of impact you, or maybe an outlook? Did it at all? I mean, were you like, wow, yeah.
When I was younger, I didn't really realize what was happening. To me, it was just another move, So at this time, it was just a move, and we were actually going to be near family now. So we went to upstate New York, where my dad was from. And to me, it was just, okay, we got another move. But then we had probably 6 more moves after that. So to me, it just kept moving because he would get a job here and then get a job there and then get a job over here. Then finally, he landed in corrections. He was a New York State correction officer for 24 years after that.
Oh,
So that's where, we finally got to settle down for the last, I guess 5 years of my schooling. I got to actually stay in one school. So that was a plus. But yeah, it wasn't until much later in life when I started asking questions about, how he got kicked out and how all of it worked, but that I really was like, wow, that was a terrible experience. Like, I could not imagine having 3 small kids and having that happen to me, so it was a different respect for what they had gone through after that.
Right. Yep. What part of, I'm curious, what part of upstate New York were you in?
Up near Plattsburgh, so way upstate. So we bounced around a couple different areas up in that location before we moved to Central New York down by Syracuse.
Okay. So and were you 5 years in Syracuse?
Yeah.
That's where you were? Okay. Yep.
Yeah, it was Rome, New York, so just outside of Syracuse.
I gotcha. Got it. Okay. So I don't know. I tend to talk about it a lot. So as a kid, I grew up in Buffalo, New York.
Okay.
Was born there until 12. We moved to Texas. And so I've been most of my adult life right in Texas, in the same kind of general area, North Texas, but still have, my wife's from Buffalo and still have a lot of family ties to Buffalo. Big Bills fan. Sort of suffered last night watching that game.
Yesterday was a tough one.
It was a tough game, but anyway, it's kind of interesting. Small world that you were from that part of the world as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so then with your dad, so you didn't really have this sense of, wow, I need to make sure I'm prepared to leave the military because my dad. So you didn't really kind of get that built in
No.
by observing. Okay, right on. So all right, so you're in the military now, and you're a mechanic. You're turning wrenches as a crew chief, and traveling and getting deployed, or what kind of, and what time frame was this? Yeah.
I had actually cross-trained, so I was in for a few years, and I went into a different job because I wanted to deploy, and so I went and became like a military police. So the Air Force calls it security forces. So I went and did that as a canine handler. So I handled dogs,
Oh, cool.
and that's when I deployed. So I deployed with the Army to Iraq in Baghdad in 2006, and then deployed with the Army again with the Special Forces guys in Afghanistan in 2007. So from 06 to 07, I was in Iraq. 07 to 08, I was in Afghanistan with the dog and running around finding bombs. So
Wow. And 06 was surge time, right? Wasn't that?
Yeah, so I got there right before the surge, and then the surge came in about 3 months into my deployment. Yeah, so that was an interesting time to be there for sure.
It was Fallujah. Is that where you were?
No, I was in East Baghdad, so right near Sadr City.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it was a small little base about the size of my office here. It was a tiny little. It used to be a political prison for Saddam. So he built the prison to put all of his political prisoners in, and then
Mm.
all the people who built the prison, he put them in the prison because he said you guys know too much. So you guys are in prison now too. So like it was an interesting base because you could walk around and see literally you can walk through and see like little torture chambers and like little like compression rooms that they would stuff people in, and like it was a
Wow.
really
Wow.
weird place to be.
And that was your home.
Yeah, that was my home for 8 months. Yeah.
Wow. 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 And that's, I mean, so operational tempo was high in 2006 and
Oh yeah.
especially with working a dog, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were out at least 4 days a week, 5 days a week. We were outside the wire doing something, going out trying to find, doing whether it was a cordon and search mission where we would, take out an entire city block, lock it all down with troops, and then go door to door looking for stuff, or if it was, direct missions or on a quick reaction force or something like that. So,
Yep. Yep.
um,
Yep.
well, the kids have decided to make an entrance.
I
I'm
see you had a
recording,
dog
buddy.
tail. And yeah, I
The
get
dog
those too
showed
in my
up. The
studio
kids
as
showed
well.
up. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the way it goes, I guess.
I get
The
it.
joys of homeschooling and working from home.
Right.
So,
I get it. And having a close family, right? All good.
oh yeah,
All good. All good. Okay. And so, so you do that 8 month tour and then
hmm
you come home and then go back to Afghanistan and do another 7, 8 months there.
So I came home, and while I was deployed, they were like, "Yeah, Adam, you've been getting your butt kicked. We're going to keep you home for a year." Because I was with the Army, so I wasn't on a normal Air Force deployment. So I was out there doing fun, in my terms, fun stuff.
Yeah.
And then they were like, "Hey, we're gonna get you a year off, get you a break." And it was funny because my chief at the time, he was like, "Yeah, we're gonna get you a year off." And then a deployment came to Qatar, and Qatar is one of those that for folks who've been doing some of the things that I was doing, we call it like a quote unquote deployment. You're not like, yeah, you're away from family and friends, but
Right.
it's not really a deployment. You're not, they give 3 beers a day. You're kind
Yeah.
of hanging out in a nice place.
Yeah.
It's not exactly a deployment. Um, and it's not to take anything away from that. It's just a different world than what I was used to with what I had deployed with. Right. And so deployment came up, and the guy who was going to get it decided he was going to get out of the military instead. So I was like, I'll take it. And my chief was like, no, we're going to get you a year off. We're going to get you a year off. Not even a month later, they gave me a call and said, "Hey, really sorry, we have to send you to Afghanistan now." And I was like, I knew this was going to happen. So like 5 months after I came back from Iraq, I'm in Afghanistan, get sent to Afghanistan. So off I went with a new dog to Afghanistan with what I did not know at the time, but I had these orders to this random place in northern Afghanistan, Mazar-e-Sharif, which was very pivotal at the beginning of the war. But in 2007, we didn't really have a whole lot going on up there. So it's like, all right, well, I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I'm doing. Nobody could tell me who I was getting attached to. And all of a sudden I get there, and the next morning I get a knock on the door and said, "Hey, you're going with the Green Berets. They're the ones who've tasked you." So off I went with special forces out in the mountains of Afghanistan. So.
Wow. And so then were you at a forward operating base out there, or was it
Yeah.
back? Yeah.
They bounced me around to 3 different FOBs. So I was in Asadabad, and Salerno and Gardez. So I bounced around depending on which team I was working for. My whole purpose in life, go find bombs with these guys out on these missions, with chasing high value targets or doing whatever it was we were doing that day.
Yeah.
So
Also very, very active time and a very busy
yeah.
tour. Yeah.
Yeah, that one was fun. I did a lot of learning, a lot of things that I grew a beard for the first time. I didn't even know I could grow a beard, right?
You got a legit beard, man.
But I could definitely grow a beard. I
Yeah.
didn't know. So like it connects down to my chest hair and to the back of my head. And like my team sergeant, he gave me a hard time. He's like, "Dog guy," because I was dog guy, So it's dog guy. You're starting to look like Wolfman. You got to trim that up a little bit. So I had to like clean up around my neck and stuff, because I was like, I didn't even bring trimmers. Like I didn't know I was going to be doing all this. Like I just thought I was going to be doing normal things,
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah, it was fun.
That's awesome. Very cool. All right. So then once that tour ends, what happens then in your military career? And yeah.
So I actually got orders to Korea while I was there. So I was supposed to be in Korea 2 months after I got back from Afghanistan. I requested an extension to do that, to give me a little bit more time at home to prepare to go to Korea. So I went to Korea for a year. And I got out. I actually applied for another cross train. It didn't get approved, and I was like, all right, I'm getting out. I'm done. So I got out after Korea. spent a year over in Korea, and then jumped ship, got out, went to college, and started what I thought was going to be a civilian career in law enforcement, and never actually did that. I got married while I was in college. Um, while my wife is also Air Force, so she's an officer in the Air Force, and thankfully she's getting ready to retire soon.
Oh, she's still in the Air Force.
Wait.
Yep.
Yep. She's got about a year left, so I'm looking forward to her finally retiring. But yeah, I got married, and I said, well, I mean, my wife's in, maybe I should go in too. I went back in the reserves for a short time as a federal agent. So it's called OSI. It's like NCIS and the FBI, but just for the Air Force side of the house. So we do all the felony level investigations and counterintelligence work. So I did that in the reserves, and I applied to be a marshal. So I got picked up by the marshals. I've got a very wide breadth of different things that I've tried to do. So got picked up by the marshals, and then they had a hiring freeze, and I went. So I applied at the same time as the marshals to go back in the Air Force to be a pilot after I finished my college degree. So I'm back active duty to be a pilot after that. So.
So you went
long
back
story
in
short,
active duty.
I went back active duty as an officer. Long story short, there I got injured in officer training and lost my pilot spot. They told me the day before pilot training, sorry, bud, you're not going. Your neck is too injured. So I went back into OSI as an officer for another 10 years. So.
Oh, wow. For another 10 years. So
Yeah.
you're back in the Air Force for another 10. So how many years total in the Air Force?
So I had about 18 years total. 15 and a half of that was active. And then a couple of years of reserves. So
was there a thought to get to the 20 and a wake up and all that?
Well, my intent was. So when I got out this most recent time 2 years ago, my intent was to join the reserves. And it was right as the COVID vaccination stuff was coming out. And I was applying for a waiver for the vaccine.
Yeah.
And they kind of strung me along. Yes, we're working on it. Yes, we're working on it. Yes, we're working on it. The reserves are waiting for this, to get approved. And then a week after I got out, my command said, "Oh, never mind, you're getting out. So we're not gonna process your waiver." So I wasn't able to transfer in the reserves. I just kind of sat around, and then it was like, what the heck am I supposed to do now? So
wow.
Yeah, it was a semi heartbreaking moment for me in my military career to have that happen. But.
Man, unbelievable. So you're 18 and a half years, you're that close to the 20.
Yeah.
Man, that is heartbreaking. And I'm going to back up just a half a step because I know in the lead-in part of the story, you end up buying an apartment building while in Japan. So have you started your business like I'm going to become I'm going to get into real estate at this point when all this kind of goes haywire?
Yeah. So I'll back up even more. So I married my wife in 2010. So we got married in May of 2010, and I had been introduced to this magical thing that she had called a savings account that I had never heard of before. And I was like, I don't know why you save money. Like, I was in the military. I know they pay you every 2 weeks. So why do you save money? They give you money every 2 weeks. Like, this doesn't make sense to me. And that was because I saw my parents do that, right? My parents were paycheck to paycheck for so long, and that's just what I saw. Yeah. I went in the military. That's what everybody else did. All of my enlisted friends, that's what everybody did. I had no clue that investing and saving were things that people did. Like that just, I lived in apartments, but I never knew that you buy apartments. That wasn't something that ever was a calculus in my head. So her mom and dad had 2 rental properties that they had to just kind of paying
homes.
some bills, just 2 single family homes, and that was it. And her grandma had a duplex, the same thing, just a single family home right behind her house, and they brought in extra money. So my wife just thought, hey, we should do that too. We should buy a single family house and rent it out. So she said, hey, you should look at real estate. And I said, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And then went to the stock market and lost money in the stock market. I was like, oh, this is going to be way better. Like I'd gotten the idea, like, oh, investing, like you saved money and now I'm learning about investing. So this was around the time where I really learned that I actually love to learn. I didn't know how much I love to learn. But I was like, this is awesome. I really enjoy doing this. So I researched and researched and researched. And I was like, okay, well, if I do these stocks and I do these things, and I studied all of the things that I could. And I found out that I didn't have the emotional fortitude for stock market investing.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So I I would struggle too bad to just watch. I would look at the stocks like 5 times a day, and I was like, "Oh, it changed," and that, like I'd feel like I have to sell it if that wasn't going well. I was like, I got anxious,
Yeah.
um, and so I gave up on that. I lost at that time what I thought was a lot of money. It was only like $2,000, but at that time I was like, "That's a lot of money. I can't do
Yeah.
this." So I pulled all my money out of the stock market, and then I was like, "What was that you said, honey, about real estate?" So I
Yeah.
started talking to her about that, and then I went down that deep rabbit hole of real estate. Um, and it took me a long time. It took me like 4 years to really of just like analysis paralysis, me doing a lot of studying, trying to figure it all out. And I always felt like I need one more bit of training, or I need to
Mm.
go to one more conference, or I need one more something to get what I wanted out of this. So by the time I really did, so we got stationed in Georgia. I'm active duty by this point. Um,
Back to
I,
active duty.
I'm back. I'm
So,
back to
so
active duty by this
yep.
point. We're stationed in Georgia. My wife and I are at two different bases. I meet one of my friends. We're talking about real estate. I'm doing more research, and I'm still kind of dabbling in stock stuff. But I'm really real estate. I know is what I want to do. So then I start, looking a little bit deeper. We moved to Japan, and right about the time we moved to Japan, I was like, I'm ready to buy. So I joined a mastermind group at that point where I said, I got around like-minded people. This is something that I encourage people all the time, and it's one of the reasons I love ADPI, the Active Duty Passive Income communities, because I know what it is to be around like-minded people and the change that it is. The same reason that you and I are in GoBundance. Like when you're around people that are thinking the same way, that are driving towards goals, it changes the way you think and drive towards goals. So I got in that group and I was like, all of these people I was still at that point where I was like, okay, it's people on the podcast that I listen to that invest in apartment buildings, that buy these things. It's not me. It's people that are running the conferences, not me. But I went to one conference. It was a Rod Khleif conference in LA. And I was like, dude, I'm answering every single one of these questions that every one of these people are asking me. I already
Mm.
know all of this stuff.
Mhm.
And that's also where I met Eric Upchurch, who's a ADPI guy. They were just starting ADPI, and they were like, "Hey, we're thinking about this multifamily stuff." And I said, "Well, I know a ton about it. I'd be happy to help." And I'm buying my first apartment building. So I flew from Japan to go to LA, went to the conference, and I go back. I buy an apartment building. I join ADPI. I start helping them build some stuff. I was like, I could just show people how I'm doing this as I'm doing it. But I partnered up with some folks inside of that mastermind and bought my first apartment building, a 62-unit apartment. It was in Tennessee. I was in Japan. Got some good partners. There's a lot of stories I can go do down that, depending on how many rabbit holes you want to go down. But yeah, that's where I finally bought that first one. So by the time I got out of the military, I had already had like 350 doors, something like that. I was helping run a bunch of ADPI stuff. And it was just I knew that a change needed to happen. While I was in Japan, I knew a change needed to happen. Like I was traveling all the time. My son, and I'm bouncing around all over the place, and I apologize, but my son came running up to me at one point, and he was crying his eyes out, and he was the only one we had at that time. My oldest, he's 9 now, but he was, I think, 3 at that point. And he comes running up to me, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy, don't leave again." And he's like crying. And all I was doing was taking the trash out. But he just saw
Ah,
Daddy walking out the door, and he did not want me to leave again. By this point, I'd already taken him to the airport because, we had to go fly him back to my parents' house because I was going somewhere at the same time. My wife was going somewhere. So we both got sent somewhere. So like, who's going to take care of our kid? So he had seen me gone a lot. And I was like, I can't keep doing this. And that's when I decided I needed to have a change. Like this is, if I'm going to be a present father, I saw way too many military dads who, whether it was or was not a fault of their own, were not fathers. Like I mean, they were parents, but they never got to see their kids, whether it was because of divorce or whether it was because of deployments, whether it was because of whatever. And I said, I'm not going to raise kids from the other side of the world. I'm going to raise kids being a present dad inside my house.
yeah. Yeah.
Um,
So the
so
travel
I'll
that
pause
he
there.
was the travel that he was seeing you do was all military stuff. You would get moved from here to
Yeah.
here and flying or different
Yeah.
jobs or different things. Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, I got sent to multiple places in Japan, to Thailand, back to America multiple times. I got sent just in that one assignment. My going away gift, which is right there from Japan, it says on the front of it, it says, Adam, always TDY. TDY stands for temporary duty. Adam, always TDY Labar. Because I was always gone. And then it's at the bottom, it says, "Thanks for visiting." Because they felt like I wasn't even like, every time I come back, my office was gone. All my stuff was in a box. They were like, "We didn't know what to do with it," because I was just always gone. And that was not a great way to be a dad. Even Adam's first birthday, I was deployed to Africa. And so his first birthday I spend on FaceTime with him, and watching him do a smash cake and doing all the stuff. And I'm like, yay. And it was like, I gotta figure something, like there's got to be something better than this. But still at that point, I was still really wanting to serve. I was still really enjoying what I was doing. So it hadn't quite smacked me in the face until that moment where he came up crying his eyes out with me.
Wow. And he was how old at that point?
He was about 3.
He's 3 years old.
Yeah.
What year was this?
2017, 18, somewhere around there, 17.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. So not that long ago, like five years
no,
ago.
No, it really wasn't.
6 years
ago.
ago.
6 years ago, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So my wife, I don't even think was pregnant with our second one yet. So yeah, it was probably 2017.
Okay. And at this point, you have the one property, or you've got the 300 doors, so you're up to 300.
I've got the one property.
You got the one. Okay.
Just the one property when he's crying, and then we moved back to the States. I continued buying some more. So I had 3 apartment buildings and a mobile home park, and that's when I really started putting the stuff in stage of like, okay, now it's time to exit. And then of course COVID came, so that kind of put a little bit of a damper in it. But
yeah, right on. Okay, so are you seeing too, like when you're in the military, because I know you've got this focus now around how you're helping other military veterans do some planning before they become civilians and make that leap. Did you see that when you were in the military? Like, man, they're getting out and they don't have a clue, they don't have anything started.
Right. It was constant. Like, and that's one of the things that drives me on this front with ADPI is like, if I can just affect, a handful of people at the point I was when I first joined, so they can see the opportunities that they have. And I'm not trying to convince people they need to get out and do this. I just want them to know that there's options out there to make a better life for yourself, set yourself up beyond just, because you'll see so many people that they'll retire on Friday, take off their uniform, and on Monday they'll put on a suit and do the same job and as a GS employee, because they don't know any different. They don't know, like, they're just like, okay, well, I got that one retirement and I'm going to do another 20 years in this same job, get another retirement from the government, and then I'll be able to settle in. And they're like, okay, maybe if they're investing in their TSP, which is like a 401k for the military, for the government, maybe if they're investing in their TSP, they're like, okay, I'll just keep putting in my TSP while I'm on a government job. Because once you're out of the military, you can't put any money into your TSP anymore. But if you go back in the government, then you can. So like, okay, well, I'll just keep doing this. And it's like, man, there's so much other stuff out there in life than what you're doing. And for me, I didn't know there were options. So I'm trying to teach people that there are a lot of options out there, that you don't have to do the same thing that everybody around you is doing. So yeah, you see it constantly on the military side of the house.
Right on. Okay. And so with the ADPI, so you've got ADPI, the mastermind. So you got like-minded people. Is that exclusively military in there, since it's called active duty? These are,
yep.
You have to be that.
It's for active duty veterans and their family. So you just have to have a military connection. You could be a dependent, but that's fine. As long as you have that military connection, you can come in. We've got a bunch of spouses in there. At this point, I'm one of the spouses that's in there, right? Because my wife's active duty. So, right. It's open to anybody who has that military connection. Yeah.
Okay. And then in there, you're talking and teaching and talking about, is it real estate focused, or are there other business?
It's mostly real estate focused. We've got some things like a blueprint to financial success. One of the biggest things I harp on all the time is you better have your financial house in order before you go buy a house, right? Like, make sure that you know your finances. If you're already, $50,000 in credit card debt, it's probably not a time to go try to buy a duplex, right? It's not like, let's get your finances under control. So we have like a blueprint to financial success that people can go and download as one of our resources and just kind of get themselves on the right frame of mind, on the right track. But my core focus was multifamily at that point. So me and my partner, Tim Kelly, we built the multifamily program, just kind of teaching people from soup to nuts how this is done. Right, starting at mindset, like how to get your mind right on it, because it took me forever to get the mindset portion. And there's still times now where I'm like, there's no way I could buy that 200 unit apartment building, right? I can only buy 100 units. Like, that's, there's, the mindset portion, and then right into, straight up how to do due diligence, all the way down to how to sell it. So,
yeah. What would you say is the biggest barrier, or maybe the most common barriers you see people when they're getting into real estate investment? What comes up?
So multifamily specifically, since that's my focus, I'll say is most people just don't think that they are capable, right? Like, oh, I don't have $5 million to go buy that. Well, you don't need $5 million to go buy it, right? You just need to learn the process and the tools on how to do it. It does take money to buy properties, but it doesn't need to take your money to buy properties, right? So it's getting over that barrier that they are capable, because most people have lived in a house, so they understand buying a single family house. So the barrier there is like, okay, well, especially military folks, they're traveling all the time. They're bouncing around. They're like, why would I buy a house here? Like, I might as well just rent because I'm going to be moving. And we have to no, like, you're not buying a house that you really love to live in. You're buying a house that's going to be a good investment. So switching the mindset from where am I putting my money that's going to be a good investment, instead of, same thing when we're teaching our real estate agents, like, we need you to walk around and not say, look, can you imagine little Johnny crawling around this living room? No, we don't want little Johnny to crawl around the living room. Little Johnny's going to, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But can you imagine how much cash on cash return you're going to get because of the way that we're able to manage this property? That's where we're trying to teach people when you're moving from place to place. This isn't your forever home. So that it's always a mindset shift for folks on trying to get them to that way. And that's usually where we're like, it's our own brain limiting ourselves on what we can or can't do is always the hardest part to get people over.
Yeah, I would think that's the first thing that comes up for me when I think about it. Like, like you said, it's one thing to go, okay, single family home. I grew up in a single family home. I've rented things, so I understand the idea of paying a monthly payment. It's rent or it's a mortgage payment. That's all.
Yeah.
But you start to think 60 unit. Wait, that's 60 toilets or maybe 120 toilets and sinks and doors and people and leases and all sorts of stuff. There's a million moving parts, and I could see where it would be easy to be in that overwhelmed state of, I can't.
Very
There's
much
no
so.
way, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that happens constantly. Yeah.
Yeah. And so how do you help people get over that? How do you help them get over that? Or what was your process as you started to learn, like, what's it take to own a 300 unit or a 50 unit, apartment building? Pardon the interruption, everyone. Do you ever feel like you're out of alignment with your true gifts, your passion, and your purpose for being on this earth? Do you feel like you're grinding it out each week with the appearance of success and still asking, is this it? If so, I get it. I've been right where you're at. And once I figured it out for myself, it's why I started coaching. Now I help my clients get back into alignment with their authentic self. I help them find meaning, purpose, joy, and energy in each day. Check out my website at ericsardina.com to learn more and to schedule a free 15-minute strategy session. And now, back to the show.
So for me, that's one of those that you once you realize it's a team sport, it helps that a lot. And you realize you're not the one dealing with toilets, tenants, and trash. You hire a third-party property manager that does all of that. And you're just managing. So I do more what's called asset management versus, property management. So I have a property manager that is managing my asset. So I'm managing the asset as a whole to make sure that they're on the right track. So, hey, we usually break it down into different members of the team. Like your underwriter slash, business manager, or like your capital raiser. Maybe you have somebody who's really good at capital raising. Your asset manager, the person that's, going to be on all of those phone calls with the property manager. So we kind of break it up into different members of the team. Now you can do all of those pieces of the team, or you can hire that out. For military folks, it tends to make sense to have, multiple team members because, there's no way I'm going to be a boots on the ground guy if I'm living in Japan. So like, it's not possible. I live in Japan. Like, I can't be boots on the ground. So I know that I have a partner that can be. So, we're talking all the time about what team members are going to help you get there. And we can associate that, especially with our military folks. Like, there's no way, look at a SEAL team or like I was deployed with the Special Forces. We use them as a very good example. Each one of them are unbelievably capable at operating a weapon. They know exactly what they're doing. They're very capable, but each one of them have a specialty, right? So you'll have a Bravo, you'll have a Charlie. Like a Charlie's good at demolition, explosives, and construction, right? A Bravo's really good at all the guns. And you got a Delta is your medical guy, right? So each one of them has a specific part on the team that helps make the team extremely capable. So you're not going to go off on all of these different things and do it all yourself. Specialize in something, know what you're doing, and then have the team around you that makes sure that the whole operation gets done very well. So we could use that a lot with military folks. Like, you're not like working on an aircraft. I was a crew chief, right? So my name was on the side of the plane, but I took a lot of other people. I needed an engines guy to help make sure that the engines were good because he specialized in engines. I didn't specialize in engines. I could fix a couple things on them. I could, help do some scoping. I could do some various things on it, but I didn't specialize in that. So once you like take that and help people understand that It's all a team sport. Build your team, know who your team is. Part of your team is going to be your property manager. Part of your team is going to be a good lawyer. You don't need the lawyer on a daily basis, but they're going to prepare a bunch of docs for you. So you build a good relationship with them. And you're four properties in and they've written 4 contracts for you and they've got all this stuff set up, like they're a good part of your team. So that's usually how we're able to kind of break through that barrier of saying, hey, this is a team sport. And you can look at people like me and a bunch of other success stories. We've got in our multifamily group alone, we've got over $1 billion of real estate that's been purchased from our community of just multifamily investors. And it's like all of these guys are doing it. A bunch of them on active duty. So you're not in a school of your own. Like you're in a group of people who are crushing it. So,
and the mastermind, they can leverage obviously each other and ask questions, and they have that community. And every question I'm sure has been asked and answered, 1,000 times. Mm-hmm. So it's not like you're going to come up with some novel question that hasn't been figured out, right, in that world.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right on. What do you see as, a trait of someone in the military that lends itself well to business, or traits, multiple traits, or things that you've seen in the mastermind?
I'll take me, for example, right? So that first apartment building, I did not know the tools that I already had at my disposal from the military, right? I just kind of sat back, I'd already set up multiple, 6 almost 7-figure contracts with various different companies while in the military. I'd done a bunch of different project management. I'd done a bunch of different operations. I'd developed operations inside of both combat and non-combat areas. Like we've done a bunch of different things none of that. I was always like, oh no, like sure, I've taken down international drug smugglers, right? I built an operation to go chase these people down, deliver things to their house, get them set up, and arrest them and put them in jail. Okay, but that has nothing to do with real estate. Oh, no, it really does. Like, it's still an operation. Okay, so I could set up and say, okay, well, business plan. All right, so contracts. My first property, once it started going south, it was kind of going south from day one. But again, there's a bunch of different areas I can go down with that particular property. But I was like, all right, well, I'm going to get myself a little bit more involved. I thought that I didn't know enough. This is my first time getting in real estate. I'm going to let these folks who have done this before. I'm bringing some capital in. I'm bringing in some knowledge with underwriting. I'm really good at math, so I'll do that part. But I'll let them kind of manage some of the other stuff. And then before you know it, things are going south. I was like, all right, let me review the contracts. And one of the guys says, we didn't get any of this on a contract with the contractors. It was like a handshake. And I was like, we're giving this guy $200,000. You didn't get a contract? Like, I know, like, you should have at least 3 bids. Analyze the bids, understand who it is, pick the one that makes the most sense. Not always the cheapest. In the government, we're always going to choose the cheapest, but it's not always going to be the cheapest, but the one that makes the most sense. And you did this with a handshake. Like, so that was a skill that I had, but didn't know that I had. So, we do a poor job in the military of applying all the skills that you do have to what the real world can bring you, the real world, quote unquote, like civilian life can bring. Yeah. But being able to manage contracts, being able to manage operations as a whole, project management, that's all a construction project is on the thing, is a project management. Okay, well, let me time this out. When are we going to be doing these? When do I need to bring these people in? How do I need to set these things up? Well, I've already done that in the military. I've done project management. Yeah. I've set up these operations. Okay, well, now I know, all right, these are the people that I need. This is an operation to go back to the, setting up a drug operation. All right, well, maybe I needed to have, I built out a whole plan. All right, what are my contingencies? Where are things going to go? If something goes south, where am I going to go? Where am I going to move people to? Where do I need to have people set up to make sure that we're having eyes on this $100,000 package of drug the entire time, right? Okay, well, I'm now going to look at that on the apartment side. Okay, well, what people do I need to have in place to know that we're keeping an eye on the contractors, that the contractors are doing what they're supposed to be doing? What do I need to know, emergency wise? Okay, well, if they start screwing up, where do I need to send a team, or what team do I need to send? And I've always got now backups on where I need to go. So those are all things that almost everybody in the military, even as a crew chief, you have so many SOPs to follow. You always have to have your books open. Like if quality assurance comes by and says, hey, I need to see what you're doing, and if you're working on the plane without your book open, without your TO open, the technical order open, you're getting written up. Okay, well, these are SOPs. Yeah. I'm not going to do anything in my job unless I have an SOP. I need to know that I have all these SOPs written out, because that way I know that if I walk out the door and get hit by a bus tomorrow, somebody else can pick up the SOP and still do the same job. So there's a lot of stuff that's applicable. And I wouldn't say that there's any one trade that makes sense to be in the military to help you out. It's your general experience across the board that is going to help get you to the finish line.
Yeah, I love that. What would you say is you see as a common weakness of people coming out and starting, or as they start to make this transition into the world of business from military?
The biggest weakness, it's we've got a bunch of really hard charging people in the
Mm.
military, right?
Yeah.
Like, um, when people leave, I'm going to take this a couple different routes. When people leave the military, a lot of times, like your podcast is called Return to Authenticity, and a lot of people don't know their authentic self anymore,
Mm.
right? Because the military has kind of formed them into what the military needs them to be,
Told them.
and then they kind of discard you, right? Like we've got you where you need to be. You're retired, and now we've forgotten about you. Yeah, we'll send you a paycheck. Don't worry, we'll send you a paycheck because you retired. But they've forgotten all about you. They've already filled your seat. They don't even remember who Adam is.
Yeah.
Which when you get out, that's like, boy, who am I? I don't even know anymore, right? Because like you go through basic training and boot camp, and they break all that down and turn you into again who they want you to be, and your identity is in the military. Like the only authenticity you think you have is, oh, I'm an airman, I'm a soldier, I'm a Marine. So the hardest part is kind of helping them rebuild their identity. Not to mention while they're in, they're always given a mission. Like your mission is to make sure we're 80% flying all the time. Your mission is to go and get this high value target, this HVT. Your mission is to do whatever. And you get out and you no longer have a mission. So a lot of people, that's one of the reasons we have, 22 military veterans a day committing suicide is because they don't know where they're going next.
Yeah.
Like they've been forgotten. They've lost so much physically, mentally, and like they don't know what to do. So we're trying to help them realize like this is a new mission because now not only are you helping yourself by building your financial future, but we're giving you a target of buying an apartment building, right? We're giving you a target of buying a short-term rental. We're giving you a target of real estate and financial success. This is your new mission. And on that mission, you still get to help people. Like you're providing good quality, affordable housing for people, right? With that 62-unit apartment, there were 62 families I got to house. So I'm like, that's a really good, important part of my mission.
Yeah.
We could have, drives out in the parking lot to say, hey, let's make sure that we've got backpack drives and school drives and make sure that everybody's prepared for school. And like, that gives you a little bit of that giving back to the community and that feeling of, when I was in Iraq and like, we've got these kids running up and they're like, thank you, thank you, thank you. And you're giving them candy bars, or you're taking them out, you're giving them a teddy bear, you're giving them something. Like you get that feeling again, like, man, like obviously kids in Tennessee are not exactly kids in Baghdad. There's a very difference, but you still get that feeling of giving back to somebody. So helping them kind of tie in to that is really something that helps that mental barrier, because it's almost always, I should say, it's basically it's always a mental barrier of sorts.
Yeah.
I don't have money. Well, that's a mental barrier. You think you don't have money, but you have access to people with money. You just don't know that you do. Like, oh, Labars don't buy apartment buildings. No, they didn't before, but it doesn't mean they don't now. Like I'm the first Labar, as far as I know, that has bought an apartment building. Like, there's no other Labars that do this. But they do now. My sons will now, So it is a big mental shift for folks to really realize, okay, you've got you have to find a new mission. What it is up to you. We're saying that real estate's a great one. It doesn't have to be real estate. You can go find a new mission. And I don't even care if you go through all of our courses or none of our courses. If you hear, okay, I just need to find a new mission and chase something down.
Right.
That's a huge mental shift for folks when they're jumping out. So that's always been the hardest part, is getting them to realize that.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. And just think, to think of the trajectory change that you're doing and that you're helping people figure out. And even think about your own family, like you said, just kind of struck me there is no Labar ever bought an apartment building, but now you have, and your sons are growing up, your kids are growing up in that environment. So this whole idea of doing that, their brains have already expanded, right? The thought of, hey, I can, this is something that dad does. I'm growing up around apartments and growing up around real estate and crawling around stuff. I'm sure you have them out and see properties and all sorts of things.
Oh, yeah.
And so, the ability to kind of expand their mind is, and then you take that to the mastermind group, expand, those individuals' minds, and then their families as well. It's powerful. It's incredible. Talk a bit about your real estate company, RAL, right? So I know you're investing and sort of, and I know, what I love when I was doing some of my research, one of your core tenets is Christ-centered. So talk about as you set up RAL and kind of the focus of RAL and what you're doing with that company.
Yeah. So RAL Capital Group, RAL stands for Raquel and Adam Labar. So it's mine and my wife's company, just kind of the face of who we are. So If I'm publishing my BizDad podcast, it comes out on my RAL webpage. It comes out on all of that stuff. So, it's my way to kind of reach out. I can interact with investors through RAL Capital Group. All of my properties you could see, well, not all of them. I got to update the website, but a majority of my properties you could see on RAL Capital Group and kind of see how that's done, and where we're at. But really, like my whole goal, and the reason it's called, Raquel and Adam Labar, is because I want it to be very family focused. I want my family; they are why I got out. Like I couldn't keep doing what I was doing. I want them to be involved with everything. They're like that's why I started homeschooling this year. And being Christ centered is extremely important to me. Both my wife and I are Christians. We grew up both grew up Christians. She did a much better job of staying on track than I did for a while. I think some life experiences kind of took me around different areas, but I definitely came back to it and realized how important it was, especially after I got married. I got married and realized, man, that's the reason that my finances changed as well. It's like, holy crap, I'm supposed to be a responsible husband helping, guide this family, but I don't even know how to save money. Like I got to fix this. Right. And same thing when we started having kids, like, oh, I've got to be a good present quality father that's taking care of my son and teaching him how to be one of the things I always tell my boys is my job is to make them better men than me. So I need to turn them into better men than me. Well, if I'm not a very good man, that's not a very high bar. So I need to work on doing a better job there. And what better man to follow than Christ and say, okay, well, how do I know that, how do they know that I'm doing all of that? Right. And that's, I go to church every Sunday. I have a life group at home. I talk to them about the Bible. I've got Christian based, curriculum. I want to make sure that Christ is the center. It's not chasing apartment buildings. It's not chasing all these dollars, which are great. Don't get me wrong. I really do want to have a lot more money than we have, right? I want to grow a massive financial, whatever word I'm looking for, a massive financial company, right? Yeah. To be able to pass to them and help them grow. And even if they don't want to do it, I still want to be able to pass that to them one day when I pass. But what good is it if I've given up my soul, if I've given up who I am, if I've given up if I'm not being authentic to who I actually am? I wasn't really feeling authentic anymore in the military. I had to go. Like this isn't who I am. This doesn't help me become a better father. This makes me a worse father. And that's not for everybody. Some people do become better fathers by being in the military. It's just for me, like that's the benefit about authenticity is for me, that's what I had to do. I just realized I'm a much better human being when I'm closer to God and I'm praying more often. I'm going to church more often. I'm around those people. It's the same thing. Like I'm a much better investor when I'm around other investors. What do you know? I'm a much better human when I'm around better humans. Right. So, right. But yeah, so that's with RAL Capital Group. That's just kind of the face of who we are and what we're doing.
Right on. Love it. And then what is I guess two questions kind of popped to mind immediately there. One is there a focus of RAL in terms of the investment type, like the things that you're looking at to acquire within that investment group?
So, I mean, mostly apartment buildings, right? But the last couple of years have been tough with apartment buildings. So last year, I didn't buy any apartment buildings, but I bought in on I partnered up with somebody and bought a assisted living facility. So we've got a 44-bed assisted living facility up in Atlanta. So, I'll do various different investments with it. My main focus has been this, but I'm trying to move over into more commercial and commercial and industrial type of stuff now, and even buying small businesses. So the benefit about this is I get to kind of invest in whatever I want to invest in. People could see what I've done in the past through the website and whatnot. But since it's just my wife and I just get to say, hey, what do I want to invest in? I bring in investors and I do that type of stuff too. So if people are interested, that's something I also do. But I go recently, I don't know, about sometime last year, I was complaining about the market and how I couldn't buy stuff. And somebody I was talking to, they were like, look, you can't control the market. All you can do is participate in it. So I said, oh, well, that's a valid way to look at it. I can't, like, why be upset over something I can't control? So let me just adjust. And that's the beauty of doing what I do is I can adjust whatever I want. My expertise, of course, is in multifamily, but it doesn't mean I can't buy a small business or, right now I'm looking at an office building so I can office hack instead of house hack. It's a small office building, not too far from me. So I can put my own office in one of them, build a little podcast studio, rent that out, rent out the other offices, and an office hack, So I'll invest in anything that makes money that I know that I can handle. I don't, I'm very strict with what I invest in. Like, I mean, I've given up on apartment buildings with over $100,000. I was like, I'm not going to go up another 100,000 on this apartment building because the numbers just don't make sense until at this. And so I'm very strict with all of that. So as long as I'm knowing what I'm getting into and it's going to be something I know, like, and trust, then we go for it.
Yeah. What I love what you just said there was this idea that once your brain is sort of expanded to, oh, I've done this with an apartment building, or I did it with a single family, and then I did it with an apartment building. Well, now this little office building, I can kind of use the same ideas and methodology that I did here, and I'll just do it in a slightly different way with this office building. You talk about an office hack for those that are listening. Basically, that's like you get free office space, right? So you have a unit that you could divide into 4 spots. You take 1 or 2 of them, you rent out the other 2. That covers the whole nut, and you officially have a free place. And then if you're turning around and renting out that studio, I'm sure the brain starts to spin like, there's all these different revenue streams I can create out of this one building, but your mind is expanded where you're not just saying I can't do that. It's like, well, how would I apply what I've learned here and apply it over here in a different way and do the same thing effectively, right? And that's incredible to see. I love the idea of the you said it was assisted living. Yeah. Immediately what popped into my head there is, well, that's a whole new level of complexity because you've got some medical things going on there, right? And so you've got to have somebody with some expertise, and how do you hire nurses or medical assistants or whatever, that again, that may be off base, but it seemed like now that's like another thing where you're expanding, like, all right, I know 50, 60, 70, 80% of this, but I don't know this. So I'm going to figure out, I'm going to get somebody in here that can help me with these pieces. And it's that the brain's now turned on to how do I make that work, as opposed to, well, that doesn't fit me, right? It seems like.
Yeah. Yeah, and you weren't off base at all on that. I mean, we have nurses that we have to have in there. We have a whole cooking crew, right? So we have to have a whole cooking crew that's in there cooking 3 meals a day, and getting all that. So you're managing now all of that staff. But again, it's like you said, I just have to have the right person in there. There's a great book, Who Not How. I don't need to be the who. I just, I can find a who. I don't to figure out the how. So we hire, a guy that Jermaine is amazing at what he does. He's in there all the time. He's like the day-to-day guy that knows the stuff inside and out. He knows about the nurses. He knows who he needs to have. So, we brought him in as an equity partner, and he kind of runs the day-to-day show. We manage the business side. I understand business. I know where that needs to go. Between my apartment buildings and the business operations that I do with ADPI and RAL Capital Group, I understand what I'm doing on the business side. So I manage that part, and I make sure that he's doing his part. And that's, none of this is out of reach or impossible. You just have to know, that you don't have to know everything. You just have to have somebody who knows all the parts. I forget who it was. I think it was Ford. Henry Ford was like in an interview or something, and they were like, what are the news folks, media folks was like, you don't have any of this expertise in this, that, or the other thing. Like, what is it that makes you the person who can, run Ford company and build all these things? And he was like, just ask me a question. So ask him a question, and he says, all right, go get me so-and-so, get me Johnny. Yeah. Johnny comes out, answer the question. And I don't need to have all the answers. Yeah. I just needed it's okay for me to say, I don't know, and go ask somebody. So many people have a hard time saying, I don't know. And I still do. Don't get me wrong. I still struggle trying to say, I don't know sometimes. But you don't have to know everything. You just have to know that somebody on your team does, or somebody in your network does. And that's why it's important to meet people like you and hang out and say, okay, well, let me ask Eric a question. Let me find out what Johnny says about this. Let me find out what Mark says about that. Okay, no problem. Ask questions. Right on. Put the right people there.
Love it. All right. So as we start to look to wrap up, a couple things come to mind, man. You've got so much going on. You've got your mastermind, you've got your real estate, your now business acquisition group. You're a podcast host. You're an author, right? We even talk about writing the book, and yet the core thing is I want to spend more time with my family, right? I want to be focused on my family, my community. How do you manage all these things? What's your typical day look like? And how do you stay focused on what's really important in managing time with your family?
Boy, That's tough. So I've been struggling with it a little bit. Shocking, I'm sure. So after getting out, that is one thing the military is kind of almost always telling you what to do, right? Like, what time you need to show up. Hey, you got formation at this time, you got PT at this time. You always know where you're going. You're being told to do. I have a list of things that I know I have to do. And then when I got out, I didn't have any of that. Like I had to create all of that. Well, I'm not very good at creating those things. I'm like, I don't know what the heck I was going to do. So literally just last week, I just hired somebody and I've got my call in a couple weeks that he's going to help me build out what my calendar should look like to make sure I'm prioritizing the right things that are my highest dollar producing activities versus my, the way that we usually talk about it with inside of ADPI is transformational activities versus transactional activities. I shouldn't be doing transactional activities. I should be doing transformational activities. Those are usually going to be your higher dollar producing activities. Just before we got on this, I told you that like I don't do any of the editing in my podcast. That's not my expertise. I'm not good at that. So I give that to my assistant. She crushes that. She's really good at it. So so I need to do a better job of making sure that my calendar is set. So what I did though to protect some of my calendar is from 7 to 10 every day, I've got homeschool in there. So I'm actually the one who homeschools my kids. So from 7 to 10 every day, I've got that marked out. So by 10 o'clock, I'm starting phone calls. I'm getting on meetings. I'm starting phone calls. I'm doing podcasts like this to make sure that like my kids are on the right track. They're on this setup. They'll come in and ask me random questions about the day. Hey, I don't understand this, or hey, can you help me read this? And no problem. Like that's one of the joys of being here. But it's really knowing that it took me a long time to want to put family things in the calendar because I felt like, well, my family's just not a spot in my calendar. But somebody helped my mindset on that again, because to me, everything comes back to your mindset, how you're thinking about things is like, you're not fitting your family into the calendar. You're protecting that time so that nobody else can take it. So I'm putting that family in there so that nobody else can book anything on my calendar during that time. They just can't. It's blocked out. You can't get access to that part of my calendar. So I've protected that time there. And now the business stuff, I've done a job. And, I know that I'm sacrificing some of my business stuff because of the season I'm in with my family. I know that I'm not doing as well in my business as I could be. And I know that that's a big sacrifice. But I also know that it would be a bigger sacrifice to let my kids be, off in school for 9 hours a day. And it just doesn't make sense to me. I'd much rather have the different experiences here. So, I'm not great at balancing, but I'm working on it a lot. And that's part of that is finding out which one of these things is most important to me. And the family is by far most important. Dedicate the time that I need to there, and then work my butt off in the meantime on the other stuff and managing all of that stuff, getting the right who's in the right spots to make sure that the company is still running well. We've recently changed some of our leadership team at ADPI, and they're crushing it, and I absolutely love it. We hired one of my positions out, and she crushes beyond what I was able to do. And that helps free up my mental space to be able to do the right things for the company as well. So,
right on, love it. Do you have a hard stop on your day? You're like, okay, because you talked about the 7 to 10. Do you have also like a 3 to 5 or a 5 to 8? Or
boy, not really. My stop I usually is somewhere around 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock, somewhere in there. So my au pair, I work her 9 hours a day. So at the end of her time, if my wife is not home from work, I have no choice but to stop. Like she's off of work. I'm not going to abuse that time. So then it's me and the 3 kids until my wife gets home. Probably, but by that point I'm preparing dinner and all the stuff. So once the kids go to bed, I'm usually back doing some more work again, whether it's from my phone or, whatever. That does not do a great job for leaving a bunch of quality time with my wife. But recently, and we're still not doing great at it, but we're doing what we can at the moment, is we've started to plug our phones in on the other side of the room. Nice. So that we can't be on our phones in bed. I can't be sending that last email or sending those last few messages. Like the phone is plugged in on the other side of the room. And then also make sure that I get up and out of bed and walk over to my alarm when it goes off in the morning instead of hitting snooze. But that way, she and I are not like stuck on the screen sitting in our bed, ruining our sleep or ruining our time that we could be just talking to each other about our day. So,
right. Love it. Awesome, man. What's next for you? What are you focused on in the future, and what are you excited about?
Boy, what's next? I would really like to buy at least one small business this year on my so on my personal investment side, I would like to buy at least one small business this year. And probably one of those office buildings that I'm looking at, something like that for me to be able to, and in office, I'm not recommending anybody to do office right now. It works out for my particular situation to be able to do something like that. So those are two of my personal business goals this year is to buy a small business and an apartment building. For ADPI, we're really trying to grow our community. We've got about 75,000 people in our Facebook group, a little bit more than that, I think, at this point. We recently built out a separate community that we're really trying to grow and bring in like-minded people that are really trying to step away from the Facebook side. Facebook can be so distracting. We don't really control who sees our stuff. Facebook's algorithms control whether or not our thing pops up in their feed. So we're trying to get a little bit less distractions and bring people into a community. It's on Circle, is the app that we use, and like bring people into a community that really crushes the real estate side. That's really dedicated to nothing but that instead of the Facebook side of the house. So we're really excited about growing that and building that up. Our goal is to get a couple thousand people in there by the end of the year. So it's that's really kind of what's on the horizon. Still doing homeschool. That's all new to me. Still, this is it's January now. I just started in August. Still trying to figure that out and make sure that the kids are enjoying it. But yeah, that's about it.
I've heard. What grades are your kids in now?
Fourth grade and kindergarten, and then I've got an 8-month-old little girl, almost 9-month-old little girl.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard that. As you come up the curve I did not do that, right? My kids are in their 20s. And so this wasn't the thing that it like homeschooling has become this thing now.
Yeah.
And I really, it's easy to say, I regret that we didn't do that because I'm sitting from the comfort of my chair and I can't make that decision now. And so, but what I'm hearing is, man, it's freed up all this time because instead of my kids, like you said, being in school for eight hours, I can actually get it done. They're done by 11. Like the content they've covered it by 10, 11 o'clock. And now we can do things outside or we can do fitness stuff or, and all these other things. And so I think that's a massive investment that that will pay huge dividends. Is again, my 2 cents from the cheap seats, is that will be a great thing looking back that you'll look back on.
That's what I'm hoping for. I mean, thus far, it's been wonderful. I've been able to travel with them a lot. And, like I told you before we started recording, I'll be bringing them up to Vermont with me on Go Abundance trip. I brought them out to San Antonio, brought them up to Georgia. I brought them out they've traveled all over just inside of their school year that they would have never been able to do before that. We went up to Philadelphia on a trip, Philadelphia, New Jersey. So we got to go walk around and show them, where the Constitution, Declaration of Independence were written. And like, hey, look at our founding fathers, and like that was like true hands-on education that they're not going to get sitting in a school in Florida. So
awesome. Where can people find you, Adam, and connect with you and your work?
Yeah, so RALCapitalGroup.com if you want to learn a little bit about who my wife and I are and what we do. You can reach out to me, Adam at RALCapitalGroup.com. I'm happy to chat with anybody that is looking. I mean, I don't care if you're wanting to invest or not. I don't care if you want to. I love being able to talk to people and kind of work through some issues that they have. Whether maybe they want to be coached by me or something like that. I do coaching as well. So just reach out to me, Adam at RALCapitalGroup.com, and I'll be happy to help wherever I can. Any other socials, Instagram, any of that, LinkedIn, or any of that? Oh, yeah, I've got all that stuff too. I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram. Either search my podcast, the Biz Dad Podcast. You can listen to me yap my gums off in case you haven't heard enough of that right now. I have been told do not listen to me on 2x speed. Like if you may listen to other podcasts on 2x speed, don't do that with me because I tend to talk too fast. But yeah, the Biz Dad Podcast is a great one. You can find me at the Biz Dad all over social media. So. Fantastic. Adam, it's been a great conversation, man. I really enjoyed it. Appreciate you taking so much time and sharing so much with the audience. Of course, Eric, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. I'm not very often on this side of the seat being interviewed, quote unquote. So it's fun to kind of come to this side. So thank you so much for the opportunity. My pleasure. You're a true professional. To our audience, thank you for taking time from your busy day to listen to the show. Always appreciate you do that. If you'd share the program with a friend, if you'd write a review, give us a rating, all those things help us reach a broader audience. Until next time, friends, I'm Eric Sardina. You've been listening to the Return to Authenticity podcast, and bye for now.